Wow, 3 videos in 3 days. I don't know if there's such a thing as YouTube Bible study spam, but I'm probably getting there. Um, well, I'm throwing this video out there only because the wheels continue to turn on um, the video I did about Matthew 24 for the Jewish people. Just a couple other things. Click today, and I'll put out there. I'll make this, a part two to that video because it's very related. So making the point in that video that uh, Matthew, and especially when you get to chapter 24 and 25, is not picturing the rapture. And we went to a little bit of an exercise there to kind of demonstrate that the church is not in view, starting with the last verses of Matthew 23, whereas Jesus is basically saying goodbye to the Jewish people because they rejected him, and he said, "You won't see me again until you, uh, you know, say, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord," which is Psalm 118, which is the part of the psalm that they need to say when the Jewish people want to recognize Jesus at his second coming or call for him, which I guess initiates the second coming. Okay, so there's the context right at the end of Matthew 23 is Jesus saying, here's how the Messiah will return because you've rejected me. And so we got through then a bunch of the verses in Matthew 24 and kind of said, even though some of them appear to be rapture kind of passages, we said no, they're probably more about coming into the Messianic kingdom for the Jewish people because the church is not in view. And the one passage I skipped over, and again, I guess you'd put this in the I don't know, people like to debate it bucket, but let's take a look here quick. But let's start here in verse 36. But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but the Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man. And this reference, the coming of the Son of Man, we looked at 2 or 3 times in that prior video and said it sure seems to be tied to the second coming, not the coming of Jesus on the clouds. And that's I guess the context that this is in is this reference that everybody uses for the not being able to determine when the rapture is really probably has nothing to do with the rapture. It's probably telling people that there'll be the sign in heaven of Christ, but they won't know exactly when he is actually going to appear and touch down on the Mount of Olives. And that's probably this period of time that's being talked about, the day and the hour nobody knows, not even the angels of heaven, but the Father only. So if we disconnect this from the thought of the rapture, which I know is pretty radical in a lot of people's mind, but I think it's got this good scriptural support. If you watch the first video, you read some of the articles I provided, and then go read this passage. I think you'll see that knowing the day and the hour verse in Matthew 24 is of the second coming, not of the rapture. And in my prior video, I provided links to Jack Kelly, who I think makes this point as well. So there I stepped in some more mud, but it's very related to the last video I did. And then something that's, again, sort of connected to this, sort of not, but thinking about the people that tie the rapture of the church to Rosh Hashanah. One of the arguments made, and again, it's just one of the arguments made, so I'm not trying to dispel that isn't still a possibility, but I just want to, I guess, bring this one forward, is they say, well, this phrase, no one knows the day or the hour, is an idiom, a saying that was used in first century Judaism that was tied to Rosh Hashanah. And so if we disconnect this verse from the rapture and make it to the second coming, we lose a little bit of support for Rosh Hashanah being picturing the rapture. But what do we lend support to? So if no one knows the day or the hour is tied to Rosh Hashanah, and in this passage we say it's tied probably more to the second coming, it drew me immediately back to a video I did when I was looking at Pentecost for being the possibility for the rapture. Let me just play a little clip of that. It's going to be a little over 5 minutes of that video, and again, go back and watch the whole video for context. But we're going to take a look at that, and then something really, I'm into this, so something I find really interesting that was on WorldNet Daily yesterday, and again, today is July 8th, 2013. But first, let's go back here and take a look. He sort of started to make a different argument down lower, and let me read lower in this chapter 2 of his book. I noticed this paragraph and it seemed to be interesting. He was talking about how the Rosh Hashanah, or the Feast of Trumpets, had this characteristic. It's a day of judgment. In the rabbinical tradition, the Feast of Trumpets is clearly seen as a day of judgment. The central motif of Rosh Hashanah is that of a day of judgment. On this day, says tradition, all who enter the world pass before the heavenly judge like troops in review, or like sheep beneath the shepherd's crook. God opens his great book of records, the fate of each according to his desert. Who is to live and who is to die, who to rest and who to rove, who to grow rich and who to grow poor. Okay. And then I thought, wow, this passing beneath the shepherd's crook I had heard of before. And if this ties to Rosh Hashanah, it was making my wheels spin, because if we go back, and if you remember from my prior slides, let me just see if I can pop that up quick without messing this up. We have believers only entering the Messianic kingdom here, and the picture of the Jewish one, my argument is Ezekiel 20 verses 33 to 43, where basically the Jewish people have been regathered into the wilderness, and then the reference is that they need to pass under the rod and sort of get separated as they leave the sheepfold. And then there's what's called the sheep and goat judgment in Matthew 25, and the sheep and goat judgment says it's of the nations, which typically is a reference to the Gentiles. And so my argument was the millennium kicks off with believers only, and these are not resurrected people, these are the ones that survived the horrible 7-year tribulation. Okay, and so let's pop back now with that little bit of context and read this Ezekiel 20 for the Jewish people. As I entered into judgment with your fathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so I will enter into judgment with you, declares the Lord God. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant, and I will purge from you the rebels and those who transgress against me, and I will bring them out of the land where they sojourn, but they will not enter the land of Israel. Okay, so that sounded so much to me like this historical account of the purpose for Rosh Hashanah, a day of judgment, and we talk about that the heavenly judge, like troops in review, or sheep beneath the shepherd's crook. To me, that was like, bam, that's exactly right. And it also sounded a little bit like the sheep and goat judgment. And so the reason why this is important, if we want to make the argument that Pentecost represents the rapture of the church, what do you do with the remaining feasts of the year? You've got the next one after Pentecost is this Rosh Hashanah or Feast of Trumpets. And then the one after that is Yom Kippur. And the final one is Tabernacles. And let me just lay out the scenario of the dots that I'm connecting here. If we say, look to the harvest cycle and the feasts for the resurrections that we reviewed, the barley wave after Christ's resurrection, the symbolism of Christ's resurrection, the sheaf of the barley being waved by the priest being for Christ. We say Pentecost then for the first fruits wave offering of the 2 loaves during Pentecost, and then the Old Testament saints and the tribulation saints being resurrected as being the Feast of Ingathering. That all works pretty good. And so that last Feast of Ingathering, that resurrection's right here. Then if we go back and we say, well, now what do you do if that the last feast there represented the Feast of Tabernacles, which is also called the Feast of Ingathering? What do you do with Rosh Hashanah? And boy, we just saw from that email that the Jewish belief as what characterizes Rosh Hashanah is judgment passing beneath the shepherd's staff. That matches exactly what we've got in this review right here, where you get the believers only entering the Messianic kingdom. Okay, so I guess, hopefully you followed that, but if to kind of recap, if we say Matthew 24 is for the Jewish people, not about the church, if we say those verses were in reference to the second coming, especially the verse that says no one knows the day or the hour, then we know if that's pointing toward the second coming. I was also making the connection that many people use that same verse to say, well, that's an idiom for the Jewish people for Rosh Hashanah. And if that statement's true, it then means that Rosh Hashanah would be connected to the second coming and not the rapture of the church. And hopefully I haven't extended this whole thing too far, but then I went into the YouTube video where I looked at another doctor, I can't pronounce his name, starts with a B, he's Italian, who had done this whole book, but I looked at the chapter summary where he was outlining what Rosh Hashanah meant to the Jewish people, and it seemed to support the notion that Rosh Hashanah was tied to the judgment that's going to happen to figure out who's a believer and who's not in order to enter the Messianic kingdom. And because, according to our Bible studies here, the Messianic kingdom is going to begin with believers only. Christ sets up his reign, the lamb lays with the lion, and all these wonderful things happen. And so just looking at the end of the video here where the chart was up, if Rosh Hashanah then is not tied to the rapture, put that out there as a premise, and it's tied to the second coming, there was a real interesting video that was on WorldNet Daily yesterday, and let me try and recenter this. Hang on. Okay. And the article was watch Muslims and Jews agree on coming end times. And what it was this Turkish TV program where 2 Turkish, they're Muslim scholars, were having a discussion with 2 Jewish leaders. One of them is a member of the Sanhedrin, and another one's a consultant, I think, for the Sanhedrin. You can read the whole article here. I'll put a link below. But also was fluent in Islamic study. And let me just outline the premise, and this whole thing will blow your mind if if you watch the whole video. And I've only got time to comment on a little part of it here, but um, the the premise of the show, at least of the 15-minute segment that is on this video, was that both in the Quran as well as in the Tanakh, or the Torah, for the Jewish people, picture the return of the Messiah and the setting up of, this wonderful reign where there'll be no need for war, no need for implements of war. It will be peace and all this. And the whole thing, I'll just give you a little bit of what blows my mind is, if we study what's really going to happen in the end times here, the Jewish people accept the Antichrist as their long-awaited Messiah, and they, since they rejected Christ, one that came in the name of the Father, they accept the one that comes in his own name, is the passage I'm trying to think of, but they'll accept the Antichrist. It's right in the Bible, and the the thought would be is they believe then they're entering the messianic reign where there's no need for implements of war. Peace is going to break out on the earth. And what these Muslim scholars on the Turkish TV were doing with the Jewish scholars is they're both relating how it must be the case that the Messiah is coming soon, because they both saw that we're in the end times, and they both see that what's necessary is for peace to break out on the earth. And the speculation in the World Net Daily article in the comments, please go read them, was basically picking apart the problem, which is they skipped all the passages of the wars that were promised in the Old Testament, and that the Turkish people were included. Now, think Ezekiel 38 and 39 were included in the war of the people that come against the Jewish people and all this. But regardless, it's the folks from the Sanhedrin and their consultants, getting on the same page with these Islamic TV hosts, and basically agreeing that the coming of the Mashiach, the Messiah, and the Mahdi from an Islamic standpoint must be close, and that they should be looking forward to burning all the weapons and peace breaking out on the earth. And what's so deceiving about that is you can see how the whole world buys into the Antichrist program, because the Jewish people buy into the Antichrist thinking he is the long-awaited Messiah. And you see that Islamic people would be very willing to buy into the Antichrist, seeing him as the long-awaited Mahdi. So you can definitely see how this is going to happen, but that's beside the point. Sorry, that's like a 3-minute sidebar. Just if you watch the video, put that in the back of your brain. The part I wanted to go to was connected with peace breaking out on the world and whatever, the sign of the Mahdi, is this curious statement that one of these Jewish leaders made, and I'm just going to play a short piece of this clip, so hang on.
Peace at the time of the
sure.
King Messiah.
King Messiah. I would just like to make a little comment. It's right now it was Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, the Islamic New Year. In the Jewish calendar, that's equivalent of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and that's the day that we celebrate everything that's written here. It's the day when we say that we accept the kingdom of God on ourselves, and we completely submit to Him and recognize that Him is completely in control of the whole universe, and that everything will be peaceful, and we have an entire holiday of accepting God as King.
Wow. So okay, I guess all I'm gonna say then is these very senior Jewish scholars, and you only saw one of them there, the other one's the one from the Sanhedrin, they were both agreeing that they're anxiously looking forward to right now peace breaking out on the earth because the Messiah, in the case of the Jewish people, the Mashiach, in the case of the Islamic people, the Mahdi, was due to come at any time. And watch the whole 15-minute segment, if you will, and you'll see how excited they are. And then peace was going to break out on the earth and whatever. And so if you can just imagine from our biblical timeline with the additional support of the New Testament, you know, let's just say we have Psalm 83 and we have Ezekiel 38 and 39, huge wars, the whole Middle East goes ablaze. On the heels of that, the Antichrist shows up and is the peacemaker. How quick, how quick, if you watch this video, would these leaders of Judaism and Islam fall in line with this is the awaited Messiah and follow after him? And then we talk about, you know, one of the challenging verses is the weapons will be burned for 7 years. And, you know, I'm not going to get into that other than to say part of this 15-minute video part that I didn't record was talking about the need for the weapons would be gone, and you know they'll burn them and use them for industrial purposes is kind of what was presented here. And so you can just see this coming together in a real amazing way. So glory be to God. These are, I don't know if these linkages between Rosh Hashanah and Matthew, you know, 24 verse about no one knows the hour of the day. I don't know if that's spot on or not. I know it's not a private interpretation. I know of, you know, at least one, probably several serious Bible scholars and teachers that put that position out. So I'm comfortable relaying it. And if I'm wrong, you know, you guys can give me feedback and verses and challenge me or whatever. But let's just put that out there. And then secondarily, you can see how Rosh Hashanah can fit this entering the Messianic kingdom scenario, because here you got the senior Jewish scholars saying that that's basically what's being introduced at Rosh Hashanah is this anticipation of first taking the kingdom of God upon themselves and then entering into the Messianic era. So I guess it just you know, it was just a blessing to me to see some of these linkages, and I apologize, there's been 3 videos in 2 days here, but I got fired up by this stuff. So thanks for watching. I appreciate feedback.